So today we're going to talk about circle graphs. So what is a circle graph? Here are two picture examples of circle graphs, also called pie charts or pie graphs. Circle graphs show a comparison of a part to a whole. And the entire graph makes up 100%. So each of these pieces of the graph are called sectors. So each sector represents a part of the whole. So here are some important parts of a circle graph. So first we have our title. The title is at the top of the graph, and that gives you information on what it's about. We also have sectors. Those are the parts that make up the whole. So for example, in this graph, 30% of people voted for Snickers, 20% voted for Kit Kats, 15% M&Ms, 25% Milky Way, 10% Skittles. Each of those are sectors. And then lastly, we also have a key. The key helps us understand the data that's given. So in this case, it helps us understand which color matches with which category. In this graph, we can see that this is about the distribution of animals. So we've got a few different options here. We have penguins, polar bears, llamas, and jaguars. So when we're trying to figure out the percentage of a graph, we want to start by looking for the biggest piece of the graph. And then we want to ask ourselves, does it cover more, less, or exactly half of the circle? So the biggest piece that we're working with is penguins. And we can see that penguins make up exactly 1/2 of the circle. So if we remember from fractions, decimals, and percents, 1/2 is 50%. Okay, then we want to look for the next biggest piece. In this case, it's going to be polar bears. We can see for this one that polar bears, that sector forms a right angle, a 90-degree angle. So because it forms a right angle, we can see that if we were to cut this circle into 4 equal pieces, polar bears would make up 1/4 of the circle. So we know that 1/4 as a percentage is 25%. And then lastly, we want to look at the remaining 2 pieces. We can see that they kind of look like they're about the same measurement, and it looks like we took the polar bear piece and split it exactly in half. So we would say that this is 25% split exactly into 2 equal pieces, or each representing 12.5%. And to get that percentage, we just took 25 divided by 2. So here are some different circle graphs with common percentages that you might see. In the first one, a graph that's split exactly in half, so 50-50. In the next circle graph, we have that it's split into 4 equal pieces, so each piece would represent 1/4 of the circle, or 25%. You could think about quarters in this case. On this graph below, we can see it's split into 3 equal pieces. Kind of looks like a peace sign here. And each one represents 1/3 of the graph. So 1/3, or about 33%. In this graph, we can see it's kind of split into several different pieces. We see one that represents 50% of the graph. And then this piece, 40%, we can see that it's not quite 50%. It's a little bit more than 33%. So that would make sense for why this is 40% of the graph. And then we have these 2 smaller pieces left over. So if you think about it, remember a circle graph in total adds up to 100%. Right now, we have 50 and 40% totaling to 90%. So we only had 10% left in that circle to fill. So it would make sense that these 2 pieces that are equal represent 5% each. So another thing that you're going to have to do is be able to analyze different circle graphs. So you're going to have to be able to answer different types of questions based on a circle graph. So in this graph, we're going to look at the Milton's family budget. So what does the Milton family spend most of their money on? So take a second and see if you can figure this out. So we want to look for the biggest piece here. The biggest sector is food. Since that's the largest piece, we know that that's what they spend most of their money on. What about the least of their money? What do they spend the least amount of money on? And that would be savings. So this time we wanted to look for the smallest sector or the smallest piece of the circle graph. Okay, here's our last example. So students were asked which fruit they liked the most, and the results are shown in the circle graph. So we've got our title, favorite fruit, and it's split into 4 different categories. So apples, bananas, oranges, and strawberries. We want to figure out which conclusion can be made. A, students think strawberry pie is the best school lunch dessert. B, bananas are more healthy than apples. C, all of the apples were rotten in the school cafeteria. Or D, the cafeteria should serve bananas with student lunches. So we want to read through those and think, which one makes sense? Which one can we prove based on our graph that we have? So take a second, see if you can figure out which one would be the best conclusion. And the best conclusion we can make is D, that the cafeteria should serve bananas with student lunches. So if we look at our options, we can see that A, students think strawberry pie is the best lunch dessert. We can't really prove that because we don't see anything on our graph about strawberry pie. And B, we can't prove based on what we have that bananas are more healthy than apples. And we also can't prove C, that all the apples were rotten in the school cafeteria. So none of those 3 choices really made sense and were able to be proven from the graph. The only one that works is D. And that's the only one with evidence from our graph. So now if you will practice the Google form with circle graphs.